So welcome along. In this tutorial we're going to explore 7 or 8 of the basic surfacing features. Now if you haven't used surfaces before, I think if you get even this small exposure to surface modeling that you'll be convinced that they're much more powerful and they're much more efficient at generating very complex curved surfaces. Now moving over to SolidWorks, in the first exercise we're going to look at the extruded surface. If you do not have the Surfaces tab, remember right click any of the other tabs and select Surfaces. So I'm going to call up the Surfaces tab. I already have a sketch, it's just a series of squiggly lines drawn with a spline tool, and I'm going to use the Extruded Surface command, select the sketch, and I can extrude that surface as much as I like. That surface now has no thickness, it's got 0 thickness. I know that because if I go to Evaluate and try to get the mass properties, it has no mass, it's grayed out. So let's go to Surfaces and Thicken, click the surface, and let's just thicken that to 1 millimeter, and I'm going to use the mid-plane thicken. Now when I use the thicken both sides, it actually puts 1 millimeter up and 1 millimeter down, so I'm going to reduce this to 0.5, which means it will actually be 1 millimeter thick. Now, as a matter of interest, I have a solid, so if I go to Evaluate, Mass Properties is now an option for me, and I can get in there and look at the cubic, the volume, the weight, the center of gravity, and all the physical properties. I'm going to look now at the top plane and start a sketch on the top plane, and I'll start a sketch of an ellipse, like that. And I could achieve this with a trimmed surface, but I'm going to do that in a minute. Instead, I'm going to use a regular old extruded cut, and I'm going to extrude cut that shape out, I'll flip the direction actually, out of the solid. And if I approve that, what I get is that shape, but what I'm actually after is a crisp. So I'm going to select this, flip side to cut. And what that means is it does do the same feature, but it removes everything that you wouldn't expect it to remove. It's going to keep everything that intersects between this yellow extrusion and my solid I've just created. So there we see that. And that is a solid. Now you can still do a lot of work with it. You can fill at the corners, you can cut it, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. The next feature, I've already set this one up. I've drawn a single sketch, and in that sketch I've drawn a center line for an axis, and I've drawn this vertical and curved lines for this umbrella or funnel component. We're going to go to Surfaces, Revolved Surface. It already picks them up, but had it not picked them up, you would have to go to Revolve Surface, select the axis, select the profile, and just approve it. And still now that is, it has 0 volume, it has 0 mass. If you want to thicken that, you simply go to Thicken, select what you want to thicken, select the value, and press OK. And now just to prove that, if I take a section through it, you can see that it actually has volume. So that's the Revolved Surface tool. This one is a little bit more intricate. I've just drawn a spline on any random plane. I want to show you how to use the Swept Surface tool. And I need to draw a rectangle. I want to make a water spout. I need to draw a rectangle starting at that point, and that rectangle ideally needs to be 90 degrees or normal to this curve. So the handiest way to do that, if you don't have this point already resting on a plane that it's normal to, is to go to Features, Reference Geometry, and Plane. And the 2 references I pick will be the curve itself and the point. And that puts that new plane at 90 degrees or normal to that curve, which should allow me to start a rectangle. Just put it there somewhere, that'll be good enough. And now that rectangle is ideally set up to sweep its way along that curve. Just for neatness, I'm going to right click and hide that plane. Go to Surfaces, Swept Surface. This rectangle will be the profile, the sketch will be the path, and there I have my duct. Same as if you want to thicken it, go to Thicken, select the surface, give it say 2 mil this time, and there you have it. Here we'll use another swept surface, but a little bit more complicated this time. I've got 2 sketches. Sketch 1 is just a vertical line. Sketch 2 is that shape there. Remember, it's not a closed profile. It doesn't have to be when we're dealing with surfaces. So let's go to a swept surface. This will be the profile, this will be the path, and it sends that shape vertically downwards, creating a flat surface. But if I go to options and change the profile twist to specify twist value, and the twist control, I don't want to determine it by the number of degrees, I want the number of revolutions, and let's up this to give it, let's say 5 revolutions. So in almost no time at all, with almost no setup, I've created a surface model of a slide. And to just thicken that then, let's give it a value of 1, and press OK. Very complicated curved surface created in little or no time. So the next example then is the extruded surface to begin with. I'm just going to extrude that and make a very simple surface. And if it's ever the case that you have a surface but it's just not long enough, you can always use the extend surface tool. Very handy. So if I want to extend this, I can just simply click the edge there. It extends it an additional 65. Click the edge there, an additional 65 that way. So it's a very quick way to make the surfaces longer. So in this case, I'm going to do the revolve again. So I'm going to revolve that into the surface. So that is a hollow shell. Just to prove that, if I call up the section tool, you can see the hollow shell there. And very, very handy is the ability to sketch onto that surface. So what we will do is go to sketch, and you see a little spline icon, but I want to go to spline on surface. Now any point I draw there will actually be on the surface of that on the surface of that shape. So it's actually on the surface itself. And let's say I wanted to trim that piece out. There's a very useful feature here called trim surface. So select trim surface. It's already selected the trim tool as being that sketch. If it hasn't, simply select it. You can decide whether you want to keep or remove the selection. I'm going to remove the selection. In this case, I want to remove that middle piece. And there you have it. Now I'm actually going to just back up and do that in a different way. I'm going to remove that. And let's say we go to Features, Reference Geometry, Plane. And I'm going to select the top plane and just bring a plane way up above it. And if on that plane I started a sketch and I drew another shape, now there's a couple of ways of doing this. This is just another way. I can actually project that sketch onto that surface. I'm going to hide the plane for clarity. I'm going to close the sketch first. Hide the plane. And use the Features, Curves, Project Curve. And I want to project a sketch onto a face. There's the sketch, there's the face. It's gone the wrong way actually for some reason. I'm just going to flip that arrow, and now it works. So now I have the two sketches there. Let's just use the trim tool again for practice. Surfaces, trim surface, there's the trim tool, and this time I'll actually remove the outside piece. So it's very, very handy. Now in this instance, what I've done is I've drawn a spline and extruded it to get that grey surface you see there. I'll do another extruded surface on this, just to show you, you can of course do a mid-plane extruded surface. And the two surfaces now intersect each other. So I'm going to use the trim surface again. Trim surface, it doesn't have to be a sketch. The trim tool is actually this plane in this case. And I want to remove this piece. So it's a very handy way of doing that. And if I now want to trim away the excess here, I can go to trim surface. The trim tool is this. And I want to remove this piece. So it's a very handy way of closing off the solid. And finally, a few words about a lofted surface. On the left of the screen, you can see the profiles that are used to create a loft between the circle, in this case, and the hexagon. And on the right hand side, what first looks like a solid is actually a shell. It's a hollow, zero thickness surface model of what appears to be this solid. That was invaluable for me when trying to solve this problem a few months back, or a year ago now. This football has a very precise ratio between its radius and the size in millimeters of the sides, the pentagon and the hexagonal sides. And because those panels are all very, very carefully sized, they're curved on the bottom and curved on the inside, I wanted this assembly to go together perfectly. There are some videos on YouTube showing how to do that, but some of them, when you look at it carefully and assemble it together, the black and white patches actually intersect with each other a little bit. So it's a good way to learn surface modeling, to actually look at that tutorial and draw that football.